podcast. I am your host, Gina, aka Gina Marie Fit, and it's crazy to say, but we are on episode 9, which means we're almost in double-digit episodes. So I just want to reach out and just say thank you to everyone that makes this possible, to everybody listening, downloading, sharing, and leaving those 5-star reviews. It really makes a huge difference for podcasters, and it continues to make this podcast possible. So just a little shout out. We start off 2024 with one of our open, honest discussions, because today is a very popular topic that was highly requested and even has some listener contributions in it, and that is toxic work environments. And so in my time, I have worked in a vast variety of jobs, been in a variety of positions, been in management. I've seen it from all sides, and sadly, if you don't address the issues from the jump, then you will see, as we talk about today, I'm sure you'll be able to place yourself in some of these scenarios, or some of these stories will also be your story. And so what constitutes a toxic work environment from just being a difficult work environment? How you can decipher that is that a toxic work environment is one in where negativity, bullying, harassment, antagonistic behavior, it's truly in the culture of the company. And employees tend to be stressed out. Communication tends to be limited. It can be a very blame-heavy environment. And people sometimes can be rewarded for being harmful, unethical, or having really nasty attitudes. And so it's a big red flags when you see employees doing the bare minimum, when they're showing up routinely late, leaving early, or in the workplace, they're bored, apathetic, constantly negative, just truly unmotivated. And so when doing my research and trying to learn more about this, because I was in a couple of scenarios in the last few years that I just wanted to grow from after experiencing what I experienced, and try to learn more so that as I progress in the positions I'm going to be in, I don't continue to carry those characteristics with me. And so there were 5 different types of toxic work environments that really resonated in a lot of articles, a lot of psychology reviews, and those were stressful, unethical, cutthroat, disrespectful, and non-inclusive. And so the premise of those being in the culture of a corporation really led to low productivity, low morale, and negativity that became truly, as we're talking about today, toxic. And so when you start to notice things, other things that can be red flags, especially if you're in an environment right now, you're starting to question, is it right for you? When you see high turnover, chronic stress, trust issues amongst employees or management, limited growth opportunities, interpersonal conflicts, lack of enthusiasm, office gossips, micromanagement, disengaged employees, or poor and flexible communication, those are signs that the work environment is becoming toxic. And so it's super important that you have open and honest communication, and we're going to share a little bit later when we talk about toxic types of people in the work environment, why that is so important. And so there's 10 signs that really dive into being in a toxic work environment. So we're going to dive into those and then flip the script and see, are you the toxic employee, or is it somebody you know? And so one of the biggest signs that you're in a toxic workplace culture is that there's no room for mistakes. So you've got a paralyzing fear, almost a threatening environment to produce, and it can be extremely blame heavy, and as a result, high stress, and then you will do whatever it takes to hit those goals, and it's not things you necessarily should be doing or would be doing. Another one breaking down is the lack of trust. When there's a lack of trust amongst employees, amongst management, or you're seeing a significant amount of micromanagement, that is a big sign that you are in a toxic work environment. Personally, it's one of those things where if you hire somebody to do something and they're producing, yet you still micromanage them, that's just a sign of a bad leader. That's just a sign of somebody that is not good at their job or needs to be trained to be better at their job. This one is going to be really tricky. It is role confusion because there's a lack of clarity between the roles. And so this is where dysfunction in companies come from. A lot of envy. This is where backstabbing can develop. And that's when there isn't a significant understanding of what the roles are. And then when people take on more than they need to take on because they don't feel comfortable in their role and their understanding, then this is what can lead to a significant amount of stress. Number 4, excessive stress. This is how this is going to flow, as you guys will see today. This means burnout. This means disagreements, lack of communication. As a result, there's job uncertainty. This isn't just a stressful day. This is a truly stressful experience, day in and day out, that there's no limit. It just continues. Next one is your office gossip. The person that is whispering, making snide remarks, bullying, constantly has other people's name in their mouth. We're going to actually dive into this and the types of toxic work employees. But if you see a lot of people gossiping in an environment, that's a sign of a very toxic work environment. 6, high turnover. This is something I personally experienced at one of my jobs when we were bought out and the majority of the company left, like I'm talking 85%. And for me, it was really alarming because I didn't understand when that many people are exiting. At what point does a company try to elicit change in a positive manner? And it's just the interesting part of corporate America that I have been learning in the last few years, just what it really is. Next one is unhealthy work boundaries, prioritizing work, lack of boundaries. We're going to talk all about this when we share your personal stories because you guys had a lot of them in this category. 8, a lack of career support, no growth, a lack of mentorship. The team is disconnected. There is no training. There is no ability to level up. It's as if they want you to stay where you are so that they can withhold you from growing, expanding, and micromanaging. Next one is gaslighting. And I know this topic and word choice can be used in a lot of scenarios, but you'll know when you're in a gaslighting situation because they're trying to make you question your own perception of the environment. It's when you'll hear a lot of gossip about yourself, very belittling. It can elicit a lot of uncomfortable emotions. And number 10 is low morale. So if you see a lot of disconnected, disengaged employees doing their own thing, not doing their work, it's because they're bored in their environment, and most likely it's because it is a toxic work environment that they don't want to be engaged with. And so before we do the reverse that I like to do, where we elicit some type of positive change response, give you something tangible, we're going to talk about, am I the toxic employee? So I came up with like 5 different types of toxic employees that most resonate with the average person in a corporate environment. And then it's going to help you kind of decipher, is it the culture? Is it the company? Or could it be you? Could it be me? And so a good culture in a company is founded on mutual respect. And it's super important that it's defined through the employees' behaviors and relationships. And it starts from the ground and it works its way up. And then you have a good environment because then management has open, honest communication and establishes good relationships with the employees. And so when you allow bad behaviors and these type of toxic employees, the environment truly becomes poisonous and it becomes the kind of environment that no one wants to be in. And so it's real easy to spot the people that we're going to talk about in these next 5 categories. And I'm actually going to incorporate some of your stories as we talk about these and share just how toxic it can be in a variety of work settings. And so the first type of toxic employee is the gossiper. This one is truly one of the most toxic types of people because they are the social butterfly, but they're preoccupied with everybody else's business. They're constantly having somebody else's name in their mouth. They're easy to spot because they're always talking about other people, and it becomes toxic because they continue to travel throughout the business, the company, the organization, and they're sharing stories about people, about management, and then it backtracks. And eventually it always gets back to the person they're talking about and creates a lot of negativity. And so one of you was sharing that in your position, one of your corporate jobs, that you had managers who were actually talking about employees to other employees, which just blew my mind, because any manager that talks about employees to other employees should not be in management, because you're establishing from the jump the kind of environment that no one wants to be in, because they're not supported. It becomes cutthroat and it becomes extremely uncertain, because if that person's willing to talk about you to an employee, what else is being said about you? And so I saw that in a lot of your stories where management would make snide comments, would say things in a public manner, would cut you down, would talk about you or your life or things going on, and then they would tell your business to other people. And so if you're in an environment with people that are like this, it doesn't mean that they're bad people, but it does mean that there is some sense of communication that is lacking. And so a way to help in case they are a good employee that just has toxic tendencies and behaviors and they gossip a lot, establish open, honest communication. Encourage people to share their feelings, to have time during your work hours if people need to have a discussion or share a frustration. Always set the standard that you're open and honest for communication, and that can start to minimize some of the gossip. Number 2 is the yes person. They're not directly problematic because they're always agreeing in meetings. You think they're engaged, but they never actually add anything new. They don't share anything. They don't actually engage or ask questions. They're just there nodding their head, agreeing with management, making seem like the management's doing a good job. So they have an in with the managers, but they're not actually willing to learn. They want to do the bare minimum. And so a lot of you guys had talked about how the expectation was, in one scenario, a girl was single and her job expected her pretty much to work up, sundown. And they told her because she was single, she had nothing else she needed to do and she should be diving headfirst into work. And there should be no limitations for her time frames of her work hours because she was single and didn't have kids. Also, this person had shared that they were actually told that they didn't deserve a work break, like a lunch break. At no point should you have the minimum requirements of employment ever taken from you because one of your toxic managers or employees thinks that you didn't work enough to eat. And those are people that fall into this category because they can be management and they can be the yes person who makes it seem like they are doing the most when they're actually not doing the bare minimum, and they expect other employees like this person to pick up the slack and not even eat in a work day. And so when you have employees who are the yes people, who are doing the bare minimum and don't take initiative, this is where metrics are really important. And so give them projects, give them timelines, give them structure, and then follow up. The biggest problem that can happen with management is that when you set rules and regulations and they're not consistent across the corporation and you don't follow up, you can elicit a toxic work environment because you're allowing these thought patterns and processes to continue and not holding anybody accountable. Next up is the procrastinator. This one drives me freaking insane, honestly. It's the person that is always late. And now it's not you're late occasionally or you leave work early because you have an appointment. This person is extremely problematic because they come to work late, they leave early, their work isn't done, and it's something that's consistent. And so it's a problem when it stops being here and there and is no longer innocent because then it's affecting the entire company. I actually had a boss that was like this, who was always late, always leaving early, work wasn't done for the day. And I am somebody that does what needs to be done. I get my work done in a timely manner. I'm going to show up early. I'll stay late if I need. But when you work under somebody that is doing the bare minimum, and we're going to talk about that in the next category, and they're constantly late, it really set the tone for this company that anybody else could do that. And suddenly people were showing up late. They were leaving early. It wasn't being communicated to the other employees during their shifts. And so you're wondering, where this person is, or you're having to do more work because the other person left early. And so when you set that precedent as management, other employees will do the same, because if my boss can do that, why can't I do that too? And so it becomes extremely toxic, and it's really hard to rein people in when you give them this false sense of freedom and then try to take it back. And so sometimes these people, they just need recognition because they need to be encouraged to be better at their job. They need to be encouraged to share a better effort. And sometimes that's just because they lack creativity. And so if they're working time and time again and there's no recognition and there's no spotlight, there's no encouragement, of course you're going to become somebody that just wants to remove themselves from a scenario. They'll become distracted, they become disinterested, and then slowly you start to realize their work is compromised and they're not even meeting their basic hours needed. Yet then they get blamed for their tardiness. And so you have to really decipher, is that person? Is that just because they don't care, or is it because they don't feel engaged in their environment? Number 4, the bare minimum. These are the people, and you can spot these guys, especially if you have a job that does group work, where they try to avoid work. They make excuses for tardiness. They fly under the radar. They have a low energy. They lack motivation. Something that I know might seem harsh, but our company does this, and I'll never forget the day when we were in a meeting and they pulled up the projector, and under the projector was all these colorful charts, and they had been tracking everything from the time you clocked in with the patient to the time you clocked out, how fast your documentation was being done, the average miles you were driving, like the time it took you to drive the average miles. Like they had been tracking everything we were doing, and it seems very much Big Brother. However, it really created a checks and balances system, and there was a tangible report. And so if you were doing your job, you were rewarded, and they made sure to recognize that. However, if you weren't, it was very easy to spot people that were in the red who weren't doing their job in a timely manner. And sometimes that's just what you need to assist in a toxic work environment. It's just a system for recognition and enabling people to know if they're meeting the expectations or if that something else needs to be implemented, whether that's training, job restructuring, or sometimes that just means it's time to let some people go. Last type of toxic employee is the narcissist. These people tend to be what they feel like is an excellent performer, but they don't recognize the team value. They underestimate their coworkers. They think that their value is higher than their performance proves. And I've been in a scenario with this when people would overly hype their abilities, what they were doing, and then they would make it seem like they were doing so much more. And when you are the person that does the absolute most, and then you see somebody not getting praise, getting recognition, you really can establish animosity against that person and that company. And so these people tend to be all about me instead of all about we. And so what's super important with these types of employees is that you address this, because this is where gaslighting comes into play. This is where when you're experiencing something and you know you're having a type of experience, that they make you question your perception, your experience, your reality, and they will flip the script on you and have you and other employees toying with the idea that no, that person's the issue, that person's toxic. And then this is where the gossip starts, because when you deal with a narcissist, you can realize that if you don't stop that behavior and then gossip starts to happen, people are scared of narcissists. They don't want to be on the other side of that person. And so they can call victim to being in their environment. They can end up being affected by them negatively because they fall victim to their conversations. And then they start to establish this back and forth petty nonsense that can really tear down and deteriorate a culture in a workplace. Now that we have a foundation for the types of toxic employees, in case you potentially might be showing signs of one of those, this is a great learning opportunity for an introspective perspective to work on yourself, to establish new behaviors, thought patterns. Maybe you're the one that's always showing up late to work, and this is the week that you show up on time and show that you can be better. You really want to create a supportive environment, and that means not just management, but as an employee, you really want to make sure that you are meeting expectations, honestly exceeding expectations, because when you all do more, the company benefits, as long as you're in an environment that is willing to recognize that and embrace your efforts. And so a few guys had shared, before we get into the part of this where you want to realize that we're going to combat these environments, a few stories that were really alarming. One was when their boss was literally taking out their frustrations on the staff. And so it created a really negative environment. And this is where open, honest communication is really important, because when things happen in life, because they're going to, that was like literally all of my 2023, you really need to be in a supportive environment. And that can be really hard at work if you don't have people you can trust, or you don't have open, honest communication. Because if and when you do, this can give you the environment where people are able to express their frustrations in a safe manner instead of taking it out on the staff. Another really common story that was shared were those of you that were sharing that you were getting calls from management at all hours of the day. And this is something that I experienced with a previous boss, where there were no limitations. The hours of work were 8 to 5. I would be getting calls, texts at 5, 5:30, 6, 7, 7:30, with the expectation that they could change my schedule for the next day at like 7 o'clock at night, and just expected me to drop everything I was doing and go change my schedule. I'll never forget the day I was riding my bike and my boss is incessantly contacting me. I literally had to turn around at like 7 o'clock at night and go change my entire schedule. And so it's just a sign of poor management and leadership when they're disorganized, when they literally at 7 o'clock at night expect an employee to change their entire schedule for the next day. It's always a sign you're in a toxic work environment where they don't respect work-life balances. And so you have a certain amount of hours a day that you should work. That means that those are the hours they can contact you. Now, obviously, especially in healthcare, emergencies happen. Like, I have patients who have called me because they're going to the hospital or they're having symptoms. I don't mind that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when they think they have the freedom to say and do whatever they want to you at any hour of the day, and they expect you to pick up and do whatever they're asking of you, no matter what time of day it is. A lot of you guys shared stories about cutthroat cultures and a lot of belittling for gains in your companies. And I've experienced this too, where you have been pitted against somebody. I'll never forget it, where management pitted myself and another employee against each other. And they did this by saying we both had said things we didn't say. So they took things when asked in a meeting about certain different aspects of the company and the structure and how people were performing. They flipped what was said and then pitted us against each other. And it ended up turning into this massive blowout where what was said wasn't even remotely close to what was actually said. And then this person took it upon themselves to take action and to do something that truly for me was just like my final straw, and knowing that like it was time for me to move on to a new job, because it ended up creating a rift. And anytime people in a toxic work environment do something like this, where you pit employees against each other, it's so that they can manipulate you. It's so that you truly become puppets. And then that way, if they can manipulate the people working at that company, then they can say, do, get whatever they want out of their employees. And so that's why it's really important to have open, honest communication and good relationships in the company, because when things go south like this and you start manipulating people in this manner, there is no coming back from it. You're never going to trust anybody again. People can apologize for the actions and what they did and the way that they would reciprocate or retaliate. But once you say sorry, unfortunately, if there especially is a multi-layer of experiences and circumstances, it's sad, but there's no coming back from that, which is why we're going to transition and talk about how you can combat a toxic work environment if you are in one, you see one is actually starting to be created, and then especially if you're in management, what you can do to be better for your team. And number one is an employee's first mindset. It's super important if you're in a toxic environment or one that's becoming toxic, if it's all about these narcissistic bosses, they don't have work-life balance, like we were talking about. They have no limitations. Their expectations are truly too high because they think you should be working 7 days a week. A lot of you on salary had talked about how your hours were not even close to like 9 to 5. They just expected you 7 days a week to be responding to calls. And then some of you had shared that you weren't even being paid, like you weren't even being reimbursed for your time. And this is something that actually, for me, was my biggest red flag with one of my jobs, is that when a company came and took over, they actually cut our pay by 20%. And it was detrimental to my existence. And I ended up having to get another job. I was working 7 days a week. I was working every weekend, averaging 75 to 80 hours of work. And I got so burnt out. It truly made me a different version of myself that I'm not proud of. And I really was just miserable, honestly. And it's something I'm trying to heal from and be better from, because it truly drained everything out of me. And I was like this less than version of myself. And so you really want to establish an employees first environment where you do right by your employees, you respect their boundaries, you respect their work hours, and you really allow open, honest communication so that, God forbid, something happens in their life, they don't have that fear-based mindset where they're paralyzed if they have to go pick up their child because they're sick, or they have to leave work early because somebody's in the hospital. You really want to set the tone that it's a family and it should be a culture based off of community, based off of we, not me. Number 2, prioritizing the well-being of others. It's always really great to see when companies try to do the best they can. And I know this is hard for small businesses, but creating employee wellness programs, reimbursement programs, recognition programs, when you prioritize people's well-being, making sure you respect the days that they're off when they're on PTO. I can't tell you how many times my bosses have contacted me when I'm on PTO, asked me to do things, asked me to take my work computer with me when I would go home to visit, and expect me to be working or expect me to be allowed to be contacted when I'm on my paid time off. And so you really want to set the tone that you have a program, a reimbursement, a recognition, and a respect for your employees, that they are a priority. They're what is making that company great. And that what sets the tone for what the culture will be defined by. Number 3, especially if you're in a management position, but any employee, you should be modeling expectations. You should be doing your job. As a management and manager position, you should be exceeding expectations. Your company isn't going to do something you're not doing. And so it's really important that you're on time, if not early. Your work is done in a timely manner. That way you can contribute and help other people. You are doing what is expected, being creative, establishing new programs, products, programs. Like, you are really putting in effort to show the company that you are wanting to grow, because if you grow, they grow, and everybody benefits because of it. And so you really want to, from the jump, make sure that you are modeling expectations instead of creating this toxic culture where you're doing less than. Especially if you're in the management, you should be seen as doing more. It's why you are being paid more. It's why you're in a leadership role. And this is really important for toxic work environments, because if there isn't an opportunity to train those people, this is where those narcissistic tendencies come into play, and it can really deteriorate a company if you're not even holding management up to their best potential. And so there should be a checks and balances system for those in management. That way, everybody has a level playing field, and it truly feels like you are working for a company instead of individually having your own roles and responsibilities. And everybody has different roles, but you don't want to have different rules you should be playing by. Number 4, recognition. So when people are doing the most, when they are going above and beyond, there should be a system, whether it's an email or a shout out on a meeting, When somebody really is doing great for a company, it goes a long way to share recognition. And some people need that like wide recognition. And so some people are just good. Like you can just give me a high five and say, hey, Gina, great job. And like I would be pumped. But some people do need that, and they feel really proud when they're recognized amongst the whole company. And so it does help the morale and the culture of the company when other employees see people being recognized, especially in that large scale. It will enable them to strive to do more as well. And you really will set the precedent that by doing your job and exceeding expectations and being creative, that there is benefit to that. And sometimes that recognition can be financial, and that's always nice to have a little more to your paycheck. Lastly, and this one can be kind of problematic in the sense that it's harsh, is that you want to hire the right people. And it's really hard to hire people. I'm going to tell you, like, as somebody that was in a management role that was responsible for hiring people, people make it seem like they look really good on paper. And you can make yourself look really good on paper. But what you'll notice is when you hire people, when they're not meeting expectations, that is your opportunity to train them, implement programs, procedures, measures, to make sure that they are doing what they need to be doing. And so if somebody's not doing that, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily a bad employee or that it's a toxic work environment. What it does mean is that person needs trained. And this is where it can be toxic, is if they're not willing or receptive to respond to management's training and the policies they're implementing, and they meet you with resistance, then that is a big red flag. And that is where a toxic work environment and relationship can be honestly established from. And so you may fall into the category when you have somebody that is not doing what they're supposed to. You've retrained them multiple times. You've given them every opportunity under the sun to be better, and they're still not doing what they need to. Then that is where sometimes it's time to let people go. And that can be really hard because that can be your boss. And so I've been in this scenario before when it was management and they weren't meeting expectations, let alone exceeding expectations, but there was no one really involved to address those issues. And so day in and day out, you're just witnessing this person that you're truly developing this negative relationship with, because if management's not involved and they're not setting the precedent for the manager, then that just keeps trickling down to the employees and then the new employees. And then you get a lot of backstabbing, gossiping, snarky comments, little cliques start forming. And then this is where the culture truly starts to break down and can completely deteriorate if there isn't a set standard for all levels in the company. Other really beneficial ways that you can minimize toxic work environments and culture is that you minimize physical hazards, discrimination, bullying, harassment. You reduce those long working hours, the excessive workloads, and then you establish resources so they don't have to feel deficient, and that the employees are able to meet their job demands in a timely manner that does not involve them working after their intended work hours. Another one that's really helpful and is slowly starting to become something we're emphasizing is normalizing mental health care as a resource for employees. And so especially, we've all been through the 2020s, and now 2023, honestly, was a really rough year for a lot of people I talked to. Normalizing conversations about mental health, anxiety, depression, providing resources, therapy, mental health days or outlets, whether that's meditation, yoga, a wellness program, that is extremely beneficial to aiding your employees to being better and feeling better. Also, another thing that's really helpful is to establish and have an operational EDI policy that addresses structural racism, ableism, and implicit bias, because I see this a lot in the workplace, and it's something that they're finally highlighting, spotlighting, and starting to move forward with. But it's super important, especially in the environments we're working in, establishing these cultures that we're addressing these very serious issues and you're actively doing something about it if you are in management. Lastly, organizing, setting goals, and a mission statement that fosters enthusiasm and commitment from the employees. When they feel a part of something, they will want to do more. And so if your employees are disconnected and they don't understand the mission of the company, this is where you'll start to lose people and things will go awry. And so if you are somebody that is in a toxic work environment, you're starting to resonate with things I said today, or you can pinpoint people you work with that are these types of employees, it can be really hard to continue working in this environment to the point that you may have to quit. And so if that is the position you find yourself in, I've been in this before, it's really important to establish a plan so that you feel comfortable and you don't feel like you're going to be susceptible to retaliation. Honestly, there's always going to be office gossip when somebody leaves. Sadly, that is just normal. People always want to formulate their own opinions or develop their own story of what really happened. And so you really want to make sure that you have healthy boundaries as you are progressing and deciding to leave a company or change roles, and that you establish a foundation within yourself that here's your timeline. This is the day you're going to make this happen. And then setting the expectation of what you want when your time comes, honestly, and how you want to go about that. And so I wanted to say thank you for everybody that contributed to today's episode. I hope it was informative. I hope it helped you to maybe understand the people that you are working with. But most importantly, I hope it helped you, if you are questioning the environment you're in, to give you the confidence to know that when you are doing the most, you're exceeding expectations, you're working day in and day out, and you are getting less than you deserve, that this is your sign that maybe 2024 is the year that you elevate, the year that you tap in, and that it's the year that you push yourself outside of these limiting beliefs to go out and get a job you deserve. Because no one should be susceptible to these behaviors, these practices, or these types of people routinely. Because it can make you crazy, honestly. It can have you questioning your own mental health, your own belief systems, your own participation and work ethic, and then it can really make you spiral. And so I hope today was helpful. I hope it was informative, and I will see you in the next episode where we are going to talk about body dysmorphia in the fitness industry. All right, y'all, stay tuned and we will chat soon.